Those who landed in the fields that were flooded, there was only 3 feet of water, they survived. Those who landed in a ditch, that would be 6, 7 feet deep with their loads, we lost a few men who happened to land in those ditches, in the water over those ditches. They just went straight down to the bottom and never got up again.
The area that I dropped into, it was only about 4.5 feet of water, so I survived.
I landed by myself, probably about 3 miles from the drop zone towards Caen. When
I was looking for the ground, I remember it was black as the ace of spades, and I couldn't see the ground at all. It's got to be close here. I better get ready. But before just thinking that, I hit the ground. Caught me by surprise.
I got out of my parachute, left it there, and looked around, and I saw some trees off to the east a bit, and walked towards these trees because I figured that the trees would be on the edge of the road.
Well, first I tried to locate where the hell I was, and which was very difficult because it's just farmland, and there wasn't anything to go by.
I had no idea which direction to go, but I saw the aircraft, heard the aircraft still flying over. So I thought, well, they're coming from the coast, so I walked in that direction. That turned out to be the right decision.
In the early hours of D-Day, Canadian paratroopers faced confusion and tried to find their way to their targets.
Besides all our equipment, and when I say equipment, that is rifle and bullets and gammon bombs and grenades. Each one of us had a vest which held 12 sticks of PHE, plastic high explosive. You had to collect up enough of these chaps with their vest of plastic high explosives in order to demolish the bridge. And I got to the bridge about 10 after 1, quarter after 1, and we waited, and there was other lads come in with their load of PHE, and Captain Peter Griffin was there. That's our B Company second in command.
Actually, after about a half an hour, I heard some small arms fire, and I headed in that direction, figuring that we were the only ones in there, so it had to be some of our people who were involved in the firefight or whatever it was.
I actually was sitting beside the doctor because the medical section in headquarters company, which consisted of 4 of us. As we approached the drop zone, of course, there was an announcement to stand up. I happened to be number 19 in the plane. There was 20, and another part of our medical section was number 20. When I reached the door, they stopped me from going out because they had gone over the drop zone. So the 2 of us, 19 and 20, we sat down again, and of course, immediately we thought, well, this is a complete letdown. We're going to go back to England, but they didn't. He came around again, and the 2 of us went out. It turned out to be very fortunate for me because the first 18 landed were either captured or killed or missing or wounded. And of course, unfortunately, the medical section of our battalion was just decimated.
Midway across the English Channel, the flotilla of ships battled the heavy seas and harsh weather.
We were on route all night in the boats. Because it all had to be done in one line. If some unit was getting behind on the boats, they wouldn't be there to have a full lineup on the beach going in.
One of the key targets of the paratroopers was the Merville Battery. It had to be neutralized before the landing, or the large guns would wreak havoc on the beaches.
Out of the 600 men that are trained to do that, only 180 some odd men actually were put in the attack and carried it out successfully. When the Maryville batteries were taken out and they had damaged the guns so they couldn't fire, then they were to move to a pre-planned defense line. A company was to follow those men from the 9th Battalion that were left. Now, there weren't a lot of men. There were only about 60, I think, left of the 180 some odd men.
I'm pleased, looking back, that I and my crew were part of the D-Day operation. We flew into the gun emplacement north of Juno Beach at Houlgate. It
was really a confusing situation. I don't think they ever imagined that by dropping at night that they would have so much confusion.
I went for, possibly an hour. I met up with two British airborne troops, and they were pushing a 6-pound anti-tank gun. They had landed in a glider that was totally wrecked. The Jeep was totally wrecked, but they managed to get the gun out. And the two of them were hand-pushing this thing by themselves, so I gave them a hand.
It's kind of a vague, because you just sort of walk, you hear noises, and you go to ground, and nothing, and then you get up and go again. And
I saw these shadowy figures in the distance, but I avoided them, whether they were our people or the Germans. It was still quite dark at night.
We heard then from the guys who had actually carried out all the objectives that we had to do, blowing the bridge, taking out the German strong point, making sure there was no Germans around the drop zone for the rest of the troops to come in. All those jobs were carried out by 35 men that landed on the field and headed to the rendezvous. They knocked out the machine gunners, and the snipers actually must have hit the officer in charge of the, because it was around noontime when the Germans came and sent out a guy with a white flag. About 40 men in the bunker came up with their hands up. And they were quite peeved when they realized there was only about 20 Canadians around them. That must have been funny.
By about 3 o'clock, there was 18 of us there, and Captain Griffin says, "Does anybody know anything about how to blow this stuff up?" Because we were supposed to have a Royal Engineer to do the blowing job. I said to Captain Griffin, "I know a little bit about explosives." Well, he says, "You better get at it then." So it was just a case, there was 2 I-beams under the bridge. It was a case of somebody standing on my ankles so that I didn't fall into the River Deves and reach underneath and put the plastic high explosives, it's like plasticine, and put it on the bridge. Told everybody to clear off, and at 3:20 a.m. I blew it. It wasn't completely blown, but nobody could drive a tank or a car or a Jeep or anything else over it because it was dipping in the water.
At sea, the men contemplated what was ahead of them on what could be their last night on Earth.
And of course, we all got letters off home, to let the family know that we were in good shape, and we couldn't say anything about D-Day or anything. But I think the general public had a pretty good idea that it was coming soon. We'd been all equipped at the camp beforehand with our battle dress that had been gas impregnated, so anti-gas in case the Germans used gas. And it smelt terrible, and the battle dress was very hot because it filled up a lot of the weave in the battle dress.
They gave us bacon and eggs for breakfast. And I said to the guy, my men, I said, so the condemned man ate a hearty breakfast.
A few of them tried to eat, but most weren't successful in that. 3 of the companies were carrying the airborne bikes, and one company was to be carried on the carriers, which is D company, the company I was with. One of the reasons for that was the fact that they could only load so many bikes on these landing craft with all the crew.
We could see the outline of the flotilla, and that's all you could see, with ships all over the place, literally hundreds. Big ships, small ones, large landing craft, landing ship tanks.
The view was also spectacular from the air.
And suddenly over the intercom came the word, my God, they've got a whole brand new island down there. And this was all the ships that were going across.
I eventually hooked up with some people from C Company who had been there much earlier. We just eventually found our way by getting out onto a road and finding some road signs, and then moving towards our rendezvous place, which was actually in a place called Le Mesnil.
While many Canadians were making their way to Normandy, members of Bomber Command were just returning.
Well, the adrenaline's flowing by then when you get out of the aircraft. When you open that door and get down on solid ground again, and you start to look at the list of the aircraft reporting in, well, most of us would go and hang around there looking to see, oh, Joe got in, so-and-so's back, so-and-so's back, and we'd have bacon and eggs and whatnot. Well, the mechanics would work on the list of deficiencies or things wrong with the aircraft from the night before.
We got up at 3 in the morning to be briefed by the intelligence people and by our wing commander. So we had 3 roles, but on D-Day, our role, the role I took part in, was to do a low-level visual reconnaissance of the city called Caen, and then to come back over the beaches and do a patrol and reconnaissance and a defensive action, if necessary, over the beach.
And you're going in against a lot of gunnery, flak, searchlights, and all. The searchlights caused a bit of trepidation, shall we say. We bombed at 03:54, so we bombed at about 4 o'clock in the morning. We bombed gun emplacements, and we were not told of Juno Beach. So what we got is a message saying, do a good job, fellas. Okay, we got out of there. We, quite often, we were given a route to fly to get off the target, and then we had a route to fly home.
We had Sterling bombers that were flying back and forth over the English Channel, and they were dropping tinsel, which would be called a nickel raid. They would be dropping tinsel down so that the enemy, when they were reading on their radar screen, they would just be blipped out. They would think that there were thousands and thousands of aircraft there, where actually there wasn't any.
At first light then, which was early in the morning, some of us were allowed up deck. There were the gathering of the storm, as it were, of all the various types of boats and so on that were going over, and they were arranging them in their order and flotillas and so on.
It started to get daylight around 4 o'clock, a little bit of light, so you could actually make out movement down the field. I clearly remember 2 gliders, one coming in for a landing, another one, he was starting to straighten out about 100 feet up, and another one came over and the 2 collided. Jesus, there were guys tumbling out of the air, and most of them were killed landing on the ground.